we'd like to call this meeting of the Senate Committee on Finance to hear the budget briefing of the Anti-Money Laundering Council, or Amlc, to order. We'd like to acknowledge Executive Director Attorney Mel Georgie Rosella, Deputy Director Attorney Romeo Santos, Deputy Director Alvin Bermido, Deputy Director Attorney Roland Villaluz, Acting Deputy Director Attorney Mary Joy Gashe Marasigan, Acting Deputy Director Ronaldo Velasco, Acting Deputy Director Attorney Arnold Frane, Director Jerry Leal, Director Reyes Santos Mendoza, Attorney Anthony Morales, Acting Manager Liza Rochelle Cruz of the Financial Services. Yeah, we'll give you the floor, Director Rosella, to present the details of your 2022 budget.
Thank you very much, Senator. Good afternoon, Chairman Senator Sani Angara. It is my pleasure to present to you our proposed 2022 budget. But before I present our 2022 budget, I'd like to give some presentation in regard to this office's accomplishments for the past year. So the next slide will show to you the vision and mission of the Anti-Money Laundering Council. And of course, we want to be a world-class financial intelligence unit that will help establish and maintain an internationally compliant and effective AML regime, which will provide the Filipino people with a sound, dynamic, and strong financial system in an environment conducive to the promotion of social justice, political stability, and sustainable economic growth. And toward this goal, the Amlc shall, without fear or favor, investigate and cause the prosecution of money laundering offense. So just to give you an overview of the AMLC's office organizational structure, we have an executive director, that is yours truly. We also have 3 departments, under which is the Office of the Executive Director, the Detection and Prevention Department, the Investigation and Enforcement Department. Within the Office of the Executive Directors are several technical units, namely Enterprise Audit Staff, the Enterprise Technology Management Group. We also have our Asset Management Group, the Commitments and Policy Group, as well as the Counseling and Legal Assistance staff. I will be very quick in regard to our 2020 and 2021 AMLC performance report. We divided our accomplishments into 4. Our function as a financial intelligence unit, our function as a law enforcement agency, and our function as a prosecution office in regard to money laundering and terrorism financing. And for the 4th is our other functions, essential functions. So in regard to our function as a fully functional financial intelligence unit, we have, next slide, we have shared several financial intelligence reports, financial intelligence briefs, and information transmitter sheet, as well as strategic reports and study reports. As for the financial intelligence reports, previous slide, please. We have shared...
hold on, Director Rosella, hold on. I'll ask the committee secretary to make it larger. Can you make the presentation larger, please? It's very small, mahirap basahin. Yeah, we don't need to see the participants on the side anymore. Just the screen, na lang, and the attendees, please. Tsaka, Director, pakilakas lang ng konti, please. Medyo mahina.
Sorry, sir. Testing my audio, sir. Is it okay? Better?
Okay naman, clear naman siya, pero medyo faint lang yung sound. Irene, is there a way of making that bigger, please?
Sir, sila po dapat ang mag-adjust. Sila po yung nag-share ng screen.
Who is moderating, or who is in charge of that?
Chel, can we enlarge the presentation so that the chairman can with our PowerPoint presentation.
Ayan, okay. Got it. Okay, please continue, Director. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So just to give you a background in regard to our function as a financial intelligence unit, we receive reports, we analyze these, and disseminate these to various law enforcement agencies. So in 2020, we shared 329 intelligence reports. But for 2021, as of June 30, we already reached our target, exceeded our target at 410 reactive intelligence reports. We also shared 263 proactive intelligence reports as compared to 183 in 2020. Next slide. As part of our function as a financial intelligence unit, we conducted several risk assessments. Risk assessments are very essential so that we can target our resources to the higher or the riskier predicate offenses. So in January to June 2021, an assessment of foreign-linked terrorism typologies was issued by the AMLC. As part of our improving the suspicious transaction reporting, we conducted our quality review for 2021 and studied how these reports are being submitted and the quality and helpfulness of these reports being submitted to the AMLC. We have likewise issued our assessment of the Philippines' exposure to external and internal threats based on suspicious transaction reports covering the period 2018 to 2020. We also issued the Terrorism and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment as of 2021. We conducted also a risk assessment on money service businesses, the Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment, and just recently we issued our Real Estate Sector Review Assessment in view of the inclusion of the real estate brokers and developers as newly covered persons. The other half would show our 2020 risk assessments and AMLC CFT related studies. Next slide, please. As part of our expanding our force, we signed several memorandum of understanding as well as memorandum of agreements with various law enforcement agencies. As of June 2021, we have signed 51 MOUs and 38 MOAs with various government agencies. Next slide. So we also need to conduct, because of the recent amendments to the AMLA, the amendments to the implementing rules and regulations, part of our obligation is to disseminate to our stakeholders the contents of this regulation. So we organize several capacity building measures, one of which is a counterterrorism financing summit. And this was conducted in 2020. But we are also preparing for another one, a CTF summit again, which will be held in November of 2021. We target to invite 27 notable speakers, and we hope to exceed our 2020 target participants at 1,000. We're looking at 1,500 participants for this year. Next slide, please.
Is there any recent change in the rules, Director? Anong pinakabagong pagbabago sa rules natin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Recently po, the Congress has passed Republic Act 11521, which included real estate brokers and developers as covered persons, and then particularly identifying offshore gaming operators and their service providers as covered persons also.
When was that passed? That was
January 29. It was signed in January 29, 2021, Senator.
I see. Okay.
And then, of course, the inclusion of tax evasion as a predicate offense, but the threshold amount is exceeding 25 million pesos. We participated also, proceeding, Mr. Chair, in other international assessments such as those conducted by or hosted by the United Nations Counterterrorism Executive Department. Of course, the Financial Sector Assessment Program, for which the central bank is the primary assessee. We also conducted or participated in the International Monetary Fund, European Union Generalized Scheme of Preferences, and the Financial Action Task Force International Cooperative Review Group. Next slide, please. Our second major function is to become a reliable partner in law enforcement, prosecution, and asset forfeiture. So as a reliable partner in law enforcement, we provide assistance to our law enforcement agencies in their investigation of predicate offenses so that they can refer also the money laundering offenses to us. As you may know, Mr. Chair, money laundering is a derivative offense. We need to establish predicate offenses. So we really need to establish strong partnership with our law enforcement agencies. Next slide will show our achievements and accomplishments. So for 2021, we have filed 61 cases so far. Compared to 2020, our total is 55. And this is only as of June 30, 2021. We also applied for bank inquiry with the Court of Appeals, 21 applications, and petitions for issuance of freeze order with a total amount of 341 million pesos frozen as of June 30, 2021. Next slide, please. We have also filed, apart from after the expiration of the 6-month period, we need to file a civil forfeiture case. So we have filed so far 18 petitions for civil forfeiture involving an amount approximately 597 million pesos, US dollars of 1.5 million pesos, and other currency at 5.465 converted into Philippine peso, 5.4 million pesos. We also have 79 real properties or 80 real properties subject of our civil forfeiture, 109 motor vehicles, 6 shipping vessels, 5 firearms, and other monetary assets at 104 million pesos. Next slide, please.
Director, is that
Yes, sir.
dating back to, is that as of what date? What is the period there?
This is for the year 2021 only, Mr. Chairman.
For 20, yan ang action nyo in 2021 only, alone.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Can I ask for a, because it's a relatively, well, I think almost 2 decades na yung AMLA, no? Going on to at least 15 years. Can you give me a scorecard, just a one-pager, not now, but for submission to the committee? What are the victories of the AMLA in terms of civil how much did it lead to in cases of civil forfeiture, in terms of criminal prosecutions, for what cases, etc. Please.
Yes, we will send that, Mr. Chair. And just to give you an overview, Mr. Chair, from our accomplishment report will be from 2017 onwards and then prior to 2017, because that is my term, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Just to give you some figure, our civil forfeiture case total is 3.5 billion pesos as compared to prior to 2017, which is merely 1 billion pesos. Next slide, please. So our filing or our cases are also divided into predicate offenses. These are the matrix of the predicate offenses for which we have filed freeze orders and civil forfeiture cases. Anyway, we will provide you a copy of this, Mr. Chairman, so we can proceed with the next slide. Okay. So since we are multiplying by signing memorandum of agreements and memorandum of undertaking, we also made it a point to build the capacity of our partners, law enforcement agencies. So we conduct several lectures and trainings and workshops. In 2021, we conducted 16 seminars and 12 in 2020. Next slide, please. And as part of our strategy to counter money laundering and terrorism financing, as you may be aware, Mr. Chair, the President signed Executive Order number 68 in 2018, which approved the National AML-CFT strategy of the country. We revised this in 2019 when our mutual evaluation report was approved by the Financial Action Task Force to reflect the 70 recommended actions. Now, with our placement in the gray list, there are 18 action plan items for which we also revised now our strategy to align with these 18 action plan items. I will discuss this more thoroughly in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Our third major function, Mr. Chair, is to become an efficient supervisor insofar as AML CFT regulations are concerned. So we ensure that our covered persons, our stakeholders, are complying with our anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing regulations. Next slide would show our accomplishments. So with the issuance of our publication of AMLC regulatory issuance number 5, otherwise known as Enforcement Action Guidelines, we implemented this. And as of June 30, 2021, the following are our enforcement actions. We have a total of 11 reduced assessments, 33 warning letters, 19 compliance letters, and 17 notarized compliance commitments, or a total of 80 enforcement actions. Next slide, please. We also conduct off-site examinations, and based on our risk assessment, we have identified several high-risk covered persons, an example of which is offshore gaming operators. So we have conducted off-site examination. This is in view of the lockdowns, so we reconfigured our strategy from on-site to off-site. For our priority report of examination for evaluation, there are 122 total cases. Non-registration with the AMLC, there are 15 total cases. Late filing of covered transaction reports, a total of 50 cases, administrative cases or supervisory cases. Compliance validation, 13. Compliance issues arising from complaints and referrals, there are 39. And a part of our strategy is voluntary disclosure framework, where covered persons are encouraged to disclose voluntarily to the AMLC their deficiencies in their system. So we have 23, and because of availing of this voluntary disclosure framework, they are entitled to a significant discount in terms of monetary penalty. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, as part of our off-site examination, Mr. Chairman, we have several enforcement actions as a result of our off-site examination. So we issued 270 warning letters. We also issued 8 directives to explain, letters to explain, or directing them to explain. We have 986 granted, that were granted reprieve. 164 were archived, and 401 reminder letters, and 10 queries received.
Does ROE stand for, Director? ROE?
That's a report of examination, Mr. Chair, being referred to us by various supervising authorities such as Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Securities and Exchange Commission, Insurance Commission, and PAGCOR.
And what does that mean when they were granted the reprieve?
Because we drafted or established our framework in that they have a risk rating system. They are assigned a risk rating. They are assigned a risk rating by supervising authorities. So if we discovered that there was a significant improvement in the risk rating, we would not, or we will grant them reprieve. For instance, the risk rating is 4 as highest and 1 as the lowest. So if the RO is referred to us was previously rated as that covered person was previously rated as 2, and now the report would show a risk rating of 3, which is a good rating, Mr. Chair, we will grant them a reprieve. But of course, this will be accompanied by a reminder letter. Next slide, please. And as for also 2021, we have imposed an assessment fee of a total of 39 million pesos. And as of in compared to 2020, the amount of our assessment fee is at 23 million pesos. Next slide, please. And we attended several committee meetings, coordination meetings, and workshops. Please proceed with the slides. Next slide. And of course, we attended legislative hearings, congressional hearings for the amendments to the AMLA, as well as the Anti-Terrorism Act in 2020. Next slide, please. So as of June 30, there are a total of 831 registered covered persons in 2021. In 2020, there are a total of 739 registrants, or a total of 2,500 registered covered persons with the AMLs. Next slide, please.
Why are there less in 2021? Because they're already covered. These are not cumulative figures. These are only registrants for each year.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Their registration is valid for 2 years.
Okay.
Validation of our report of examination. There are several validation activities. For instance, if there is an RO referred to us, we need to validate some violations. So we conduct validation activities. So these are how validation activities would show. Total of 33 validation activities. So this slide would show our inclusion in the gray list. Mr. Chairman, I would like to inform the committee that our gray listing, there are 4 points that I wanted to highlight on this issue. The Philippines was gray listed in view of our failure to comply with the 70 recommended actions in the mutual evaluation report as of 2019. But we were able to deliver 52 of the 70, and so 18 only remain. So that's around 74%, and this is despite the pandemic and the community quarantines and the lockdowns. But second important point, Mr. Chair,
can you give us what are those 18 items, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. That will be shown in the next slide.
Okay.
Yes, but prior to that, the second point is that the third round of mutual evaluation report, previous slide, please, is that we are being assessed not just on technical compliance, but also on effectiveness compliance. So, Mr. Chairman, if we are assessed on technical compliance, this representation would be confident to say that we would not have been gray listed, because as of now, we are already largely compliant or compliant with 35 of the 40 Financial Action Task Force recommendations.
What are the 5 that you are not compliant with?
Okay, we will provide you with that report, Mr. Chairman. We did not mention that because they are not key recommendations, Mr. Chairman, that jurisdictions are allowed leeway to demonstrate if compliance within a specified period of time. Not because they identified several key recommendations, and we are already largely compliant on those key recommendations.
Yeah, kindly give us the breakdown. Which ones are compliant, which ones are largely compliant?
Yes, Mr. Chair. That's number 3 of our assignment. And number 3, important point, Mr. Chair, although we are gray listed, there is no countermeasure that will be imposed by the Financial Action Task Force. This is in view of our 52 effectiveness or demonstration or delivery of our compliance on 52 of the 70 recommended actions. And so the Financial Action Task Force did not impose any countermeasure on
Pati yung 52 and 70, please give it to us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We'll provide you with the 70 recommended actions and those that we were able to comply. So proceeding now to the next slide, this slide will show you our 18 remaining action plan item. But at the bottom, we highlighted that this is already at 17.
What is
because,
BO?
IO means immediate outcome po.
BO. There's BO there. SEC to strictly enforce BO disclosure.
That's beneficial ownership information, Mr. Chairman. So the SEC has issued a circular mandating all corporations to disclose beneficial ownership information in their general information sheet filing every year. So
What is LEAS and what is ML?
LEAS is law enforcement.
Can we please avoid jargon in all your presentation? I mean, you may be very familiar with it. We're not familiar with the jargon.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. So LEAS is law enforcement agencies. ML is money laundering investigations.
Okay.
TF is terrorism financing. And TFS is targeted financial sanctions.
What is T? Within LEAS, investigating T/TF.
Terrorism and /terrorism financing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So if you will notice in IO 11,
What is NPO?
It's non-profit organizations po.
Okay.
So if you will notice on immediate outcome 11, we already addressed this. This is supposed to be
TPS. What is TPS and TFS?
TFS po is targeted financial sanctions.
Targeted
financial sanctions. There are two areas that we apply targeted financial sanctions. So targeted financial sanctions is freezing without delay and denying funds to organizations and individuals. So we have two frameworks.
Kindly give us a new presentation that does not have so many acronyms. Yes, how will we defend your budget if we don't even understand it?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will do that.
Yeah, can you walk through this individually? What is stopping us from implementing them, or what are the obstacles, if any?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So in IO1, we were rated as okay, and IO2 as well, and IO4. So let's proceed with immediate outcome 3. So risk-based designated non-financial businesses and professions supervision.
I don't see that on screen, no? Ang nakikita ko lang is IO5 to IO11. What are you reading?
The same slide po.
Wala, nakakat siya dito sa screen namin, no? Sa computer screen namin.
Can you show this, Rachel? The entire slide.
Okay, there. IO2. Sige, start from the beginning, please, again.
So IO2 and IO4, we are okay with these IOs together with IO1. So I will start with immediate outcome 3. So with the inclusion of our new covered persons, the real estate brokers and developers, the assessors would need to establish that we are implementing the recently passed law. And nakikita niyo po ba?
Hindi, nawawala. Tinanggal. Tapos maliit. Binalik, maliit. Lumiit pa. What's the problem?
Yan po, Mr. Chairman.
Comsec, can you take over na lang para tayo na lang rather than sila? Can we be the one? Kasi it's very difficult to follow eh. It's very technical eh. Diba? Can we take over the control of the PowerPoint para it is on a timely basis. We can read it while the director is explaining it.
We're okay with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, let's suspend for 5 minutes so the committee can fix everything.
Okay, sir.
Sir, ayusin
Yeah.
po namin.
Director, can you fix it, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes po.
Rachel, can you coordinate?
Hindi, si Director Irene ang kausap ko, Director Rosella. Yung
Okay.
director namin sa budget office. Yeah, Director Irene, kindly fix the PowerPoint. So,
Yes, sir po.
and then the volume also, medyo mahina yung volume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, proceeding with discussion on immediate outcome 3. So, there are 3 action plan items for immediate outcome 3. By the way, Mr. Chairman, there are 11 immediate outcomes for which the Financial Action Task Force assesses our effectiveness compliance. So, IO3 would pertain to supervision of covered persons. So, there are 3 action plan items, namely risk-based designated non-financial businesses and profession supervision. This would include the newly captured covered persons, the real estate brokers and developers. The second action plan item is mitigate risk of casino junkets. This is a deliverable item by the Philippine Amusement Gaming Corporation. Third is continue the money service businesses registration and enforcement actions against illegal money service businesses. Because this is a deliverable item by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas in their efforts to cut off the operations of illegal money service businesses.
Is that who do they register with? The BSP, the money service MSBs?
The BSP po, Mr. Chairman.
What's the universe of MSBs? Ilang na nang register niya?
Ang MSBs, Mr. Chairman, around mga nasa 1 to 2,000 na lang po yan.
What is
Compared to
DNFBP?
Designated non-financial businesses and professions. So kasama po dyan yung mga real estate brokers and developers, mga casinos, yung mga dealers of precious stones and metals, kasama rin po yung company service providers, and yung mga lawyers and accountants that perform several functions. Hindi naman po lahat ng mga lawyers and accountants.
Okay.
Non-financial po, yun po yung keyword doon. These are non-financial businesses and professions.
Natin insurance, natin banking, natin
Hindi po.
securities, I suppose.
Nasa financial po yun. Yung mga...
Okay.
Okay, for immediate outcome 5, Mr. Chairman, since the SEC has submitted the copy of the circular to our assessors, it is mere, and this was recently issued also, and so again, they want SEC to demonstrate effective implementation, and that's why the action plan item is to improve and ensure timely access of to beneficial ownership information.
How will they provide that? How does the SEC access that?
Held.
How does the SEC propose to improve on that?
Mr. Chairman, it's merely for implementation because this is a annual filing of the general information sheet.
Kasama sa
So-
GIS na yan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So
Di ba maraming di nagpa-file ng GIS? Does the SEC take action against them? There's thousands of companies, di ba? Mas maraming di nagpa-file, di ba?
That's precisely the point, Mr. Chairman. The last part would show strictly enforce BO disclosure obligations by implementing sanctions. So, yun po yung tinitingnan ng Financial Action Task Force. For immediate outcome 6 po, ito po yung deliverable ng Amlc. Because of the increase in request for information, they noticed that we need an increase in human resources, but they recognize effective operational analysis currently being observed, but they noted that we need to improve timely dissemination of information. So we are targeting to deliver this action plan item for our January 2022 submission. For immediate outcome 7 naman po, this pertains to investigation, money laundering investigations. So they noticed that Anti-Money Laundering Council with scarce human resources have very limited number of filings, and so an action plan. There are 2 action plan items which are use and develop financial intelligence by law enforcement agencies tasked with money laundering investigations. So our strategy here, Mr. Chairman, is to deputize our law enforcement agencies so that they will have confidence to investigate money laundering cases. And so we are conducting various workshops and seminars to really build the capacity of our law enforcement agencies. And the immediate outcome, seven's number 2 deliverable is to increase money laundering investigations, particularly transnational crimes, foreign proceeds, and if possible, use
When you
international.
say transnational crimes, the proceeds are laundered in the Philippines, or the crime occurred here but laundered outside the Philippines?
Vice versa po, tama po kayo, Mr. Chairman. Either laundered.
Which one is it?
Both po.
Both. It refers to both.
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Has the Amlc been involved in a successful transnational prosecution where you availed of like the exchange of information, for instance, with countries, di ba? May mga treaties tayo with exchange of information obligations, di ba?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. In fact, yung kay Poles, we are running after several properties of Poles.
Meron na bang successful na nakuha?
Naka-freeze naman yung assets noon, Mr. Chairman. So
it's frozen in a foreign jurisdiction or in a local jurisdiction?
Frozen in the US, frozen all those within our jurisdiction, frozen din po.
Pagka ganong frozen, what is the procedure then?
So we will file a civil forfeiture case so that will be forfeited in favor of the government.
You file the civil forfeiture abroad?
It will be filed by the law enforcement agencies and heard abroad and then turned over to the Philippine government.
So they prosecute it all the way to sentencing. Tama ba yun?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mabilis po ang criminal prosecution nila.
Okay. Yeah, please proceed.
For immediate outcome 8, this is prosecution naman of money laundering cases. So law enforcement agencies are asked to prioritize asset tracing and use forfeiture upon conviction. If you will recall, Mr. Chairman, the Supreme Court has issued a rule on criminal forfeiture in that courts will now impose the accessory penalty of forfeiture of assets that are used as instruments in the crime or proceeds derived from the predicate offenses as well as money laundering offenses. This was made effective on May 31, 2021 only, and this was noted by the assessors. So again, they want to see effective implementation of that rule on criminal forfeiture.
Bakit wala previous to that there was no rule?
Wala po, Mr. Chairman. Kaya po ngayon nag-a-amend na po ng mga information because indicated in the rules is that the prayer to forfeit the assets should be included in the information. So we have successfully amended several informations now, Mr. Chairman. The next item in immediate outcome 8 on prosecution of money laundering is to implement cross-border declaration in all air and sea ports and detection of false declarations and confiscations resulting therefrom. This is an action plan item that must be delivered by the Bureau of Customs. In fairness to the Bureau of Customs, the Commissioner, Leon Guerrero, has already issued several memorandum mandating the implementation of cross-border declarations in all air and sea ports. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has donated 10 money counters to the Bureau of Customs. The Amlc is procuring additional 5, and this will be turned over also to the Bureau of Customs for donation. So we are also looking at January 2022 if we can comply with the second action plan item on immediate outcome 8. For immediate outcome 9, Mr. Chairman, this is on terrorism financing, investigation, and prosecution. So terrorism financing was criminalized by the Philippines back in 2012, but this was unfortunately not fully implemented since then. And so we have zero conviction on terrorism financing. So the mandate for the Philippines is to increase terrorism financing identification and investigation by law enforcement agencies as well as prosecution. And
Was
then
that not amended by the anti-terrorism law?
No.
With the view to making it easier to catch the terrorist financiers?
It did not amend the Terrorism Financing Prevention and Suppression Act, Mr. Chairman. Terrorism financing is a standalone crime. It is punishable by Republic Act 10168. Anti-Terrorism Act is 11429. So
Okay, so unchanged yun, unchanged since
unchanged
2012.
po yun. Unchanged po yun.
So what accounts for the non-prosecution or non-filing of cases?
Personally, Mr. Chairman, is lack of awareness. I think is the reason for non-implementation.
No cases at all have been filed under that statute?
Until 2017, Mr. Chairman.
That was the first case filed?
Yes, we started filing terrorism financing cases.
Okay.
So the second item is increased number of terrorism financing investigators and enhanced investigation and prosecution capacity within LEAs investigating terrorism and terrorism financing. Again, our strategy here is to deputize our law enforcement agencies for them to conduct terrorism financing investigations as well. For immediate outcome 10, Mr. Chairman, this is our targeted financial sanctions framework. Again, as mentioned a while ago, we have two frameworks in place for targeted financial sanctions. The first one is more complicated than the second. The first one is proliferation financing of weapons of mass destruction of Iran and North Korea. So that's the first targeted financial sanctions framework. So part of our recent amendments is the additional function of the Amlc to implement targeted financial sanctions on proliferation financing of weapons of mass destruction. So that's the first framework. And again, since this is a recent amendment, they also want us to demonstrate effective implementation of that law. Second, targeted financial sanction framework is pursuant to the Anti-Terrorism Act po, which was effective in 2020. So again, this will entail the designation by the Anti-Terrorism Council, and then the AMLC will issue the sanctions freeze order. Again po, just to give you a context on the targeted financial sanctions framework, there are two objectives under that framework. It is to freeze without delay. So again, under those two frameworks, freeze without delay the assets that are used by Iran and North Korea in developing their weapons of mass destruction, and for terrorist organizations and individuals designated by the Anti-Terrorism Council. So second action plan item po for immediate outcome 10 is appropriate.
Before you can I go back to I-09?
Yes,
what is the status of the case you filed in 2017? Is that on trial already? Did it reach trial or?
For terrorism financing po, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, so we started, we started filing in 2018, and now the Department of Justice has resolved some of those cases, and they have filed cases with the court. So we can also provide you with the list of those cases.
Yeah, please give me the details of the cases.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The status, please.
So yung pong sinabi kong filing with the Department of Justice, and now the Department of Justice has resolved to
files it with the court. Yeah, okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
What is the most advanced stage there in the terrorist finance cases?
That will be the matriarch of the Maute, Mr. Chairman. So
saan yun? Trial stage?
Trial stage na po, but because of the closure of the courts, suspended po lahat ng mga trials. Physical closure of the courts, affected po tayo doon.
Okay, thanks.
So for IO
10, number 2. Yeah.
Number 2, appropriate measures for non-profit organizations including unregistered non-profit organizations without disrupting legitimate activities. Again po, this is a deliverable item by the Securities and Exchange Commission insofar as they register or issue certificates of registration for NPOs. So what the Financial Action Task Force is looking at is sanctions or measures that would ensure that unregistered NPOs are sanctioned or appropriate measures are taken so that illegally operating
Wala si Director. Yeah, please inform him, Director Irene, that he's offline.
Sige po, sir.
Yeah, I will suspend the meeting in the meantime. Just inform me when he's back online, Director, please.
Sige po, sir.
Mo.
Nasa workshop po kasi kami, Mr. Chairman. So nasa Laguna po ako, outside Metro Manila.
Okay.
So immediate outcome 10 po is there are two action plan items, namely understanding of our targeted financial sanctions obligations by our covered persons. So again, they need to understand their obligations, which is to freeze without delay and to deny funds from those designated as terrorists or those organizations or individuals facilitating the manufacture of weapons of mass destruction of Iran and North Korea. And the TFS...
Director, let me ask you about yung sa NPOs, no? Is there a case in the literature na ginamit ang NPOs for money laundering? Meron bang ganon? May in other countries, for other jurisdictions, for instance?
More of terrorism financing po sila, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Participate po yung financing through
Right.
NPO. Kaya po siya nasa IO10 kasi po yung IO10 is more of terrorism and terrorism financing.
Right, okay.
Okay po. So for last po doon sa immediate outcome 11 is targeted financial sanctions sa risk-based supervision. Again, this is addressed to all supervising authorities, again, so that we understand the TFS or targeted financial sanctions.
Nawala ulit, Director Irene? Nawala ulit siya?
Opo.
Maybe tell him he doesn't have to turn on his monitor. So, maybe, di ba? Para baka naubos yung bandwidth nila sa video. Okay, we'll suspend in the meantime.
Yes po. So the last item in immediate outcome 11 was delivered already, and this will be confirmed by the Financial Action Task Force in their October meeting. So once confirmed, our 18 action plan item will be down to 17, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, next slide will be the fourth major activities or functions of the Amlc. Next slide, please. So, as a national government agency manned by PSP employees assigned in the Amlc Secretary to provide overarching support services. Next slide. So, we'll be very quick on the accomplishments of this fourth major function. Next slide. So this is our performance indicators. This is an old indicator, Mr. Chairman. And the next slide would show our comparative approved budget. So for 2020, we had a 130 million budget. Again, thanks to the chairman. 2021, we also have 185 million peso budget. Again, thanks to the chairman, Senator Sani Angara. Unfortunately, again, for 2022, the National Expenditure Program only assigned 77 million to us, although our proposed budget is 185 million. Next slide, please.
What is your proposed, Director? What's the proposed amount?
Our proposed budget, Mr. Chairman, is 166 million pesos.
166.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Please show it in the next slide. Move it again. Next slide again. Yes, this is our budget proposal. Again, Mr. Chairman, we never ask for more than we need. But again, as mentioned, I highlighted our 17 action plan items, and the budget cut will really affect our delivery of those 17 action plan items, which will be shown in the next slide, Mr. Chairman. So we need a consultant that is expert in technical compliance with our international cooperation review group. And these consultants come from the Financial Action Task Force itself. They were even the drafters of those methodologies, and that's why it's very critical that we hire them. We hired them since 2020, and that is why we were able to deliver 52 of the 70 recommended actions. And now
Sino
we
yan?
intend
Sino yung mga yan?
sila po yung former executive secretary ng Financial Action Task Force Secretary. Mga foreigners po ito, Mr. Chairman. So in dollars po ang pinag-uusapan natin.
What nationality?
Canadian po and Australian. And then sila po, yung firm po nila ay nag-organize ng yung pong firm na yon ay nag-hire po ng mga nagre-retire na mga expert din po sa mga gantong mga assessments at saka mutual evaluation. So dinidistribute din po yan sa madami rin po mga individuals na part din ng firm. And then our regular maintenance and other operating expenses, again, nakat po ito. Our proposal is 26, but and it was 9.8 only, for a total of difference of 16.8. Again, capacity building program, ongoing workshops and trainings po ng ating mga i-deputize ng mga law enforcement agencies. Nakalatag na rin po yan sa amin for 2022. This is a very huge cut. We also intend to improve our operations by purchasing computer softwares. Again, this will be cut if we don't get the proposed proposed budget. Domestic and international commitments with risk assessment activities. Again, this is in connection with our 17 action plan items. And for 6 machinery and equipment, because we are currently at 179, Mr. Chairman, and our plantilla positions would be at 250 or 233. So there will be additional procurements for our computers and equipments for our new high-risk. Interagency collaboration, number 7, again, coordination with various law enforcement agencies. These are projects that we have laid down in our proposed budget. And assessment and operational planning for our council and our staff meetings, 3.4 million pesos. Next slide, please. The semi-expendable expenses, again, in view of our hiring of new officers and staff in the AMS Secretariat, our periodicals subscription, and additional MOE due to our expansion. So the difference is 88 million pesos versus our proposed budget of 128 million pesos. Next slide, please. Since there will be other activities, Mr. Chairman, particularly the so this is the National Expenditure Program as approved, Mr. Chairman. So 61.97 million pesos. And for capital outlays, a total of 15 million pesos for 2022 NEP. Status of fund utilization as of June 30, Mr. Chairman. This is the matrix or this PowerPoint slide. It's really very difficult to cure at the moment because of the closure and frequent community quarantines, but we are doing our very best to expend all our budgets, budget allocations, Mr. Chairman. And one final note, Mr. Chairman, the COA has rendered an unmodified opinion on the fairness of presentation of the AMLC's financial statements as of December 31, 2020. There are details here, but I don't think this will be relevant, but just to show you that we have fully implemented all the recommendations of the Commission on Audit as of 2020 FS financial statements. Next slide, next slide. Next slide. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And our last plea, Mr. Chairman, is we're hoping that we can get our proposed budget so that we can exit and deliver the action plan items. Although I've mentioned that there are action plan items that are specific to various law enforcement agencies and supervising authorities. But then again, the driver would be the AMLC, and without funding, Mr. Chairman, our efforts will be significantly impaired, Mr. Chairman. With that, I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman, and if there are any more questions, I am willing to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Director Rosella. Ako wala na akong tanong. So as in previous years, we'll try to augment your budget, no? But it's difficult to promise at this early stage, having not heard all the budgets of the different agencies, and given that marami pang kulang sa budget sa NEP o sa NEP ng in terms of health interventions, kulang-kulang talaga siya. So those will be the first priority. That's what I've told all of the agencies who are asking for augmentation in their funding, no? So Thank you. Thank you to Amlc and to all the staff. We'll recommend your budget favorably without prejudice, of course, to possible augmentations or increases
Thank you.
for plenary action. So salamat Director Rosella and to Amlc. Ingat po kayo.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the LBRMO. Thank you, Irene. Salamat.